Hey everyone, it's Damien, Sleepy Reader. I am here with another video. This time I just wanted to show you a few, basically art books or things focused on the art of comics that I thought were interesting. So I've got the Hulk director's cut. I've got the Savage Sword of Conan, the black and white version, the non-color version of the most recent Savage Sword of Conan, and I've got the Marvel art of Conan the Barbarian. So I thought I'd give you some thoughts on each of those. I'll turn around the camera and we'll chat. All right. First up is the Immortal Hulk #1 director's cut. And I guess I think I've seen other comics that have director's cuts. If something becomes popular, then they resell it again more expensively with extra materials thrown in. Obviously, it has to do with how popular a comic is, and this Immortal Hulk may be Marvel's most popular comic currently coming out on the shelves, and it's well deserved. I really love the Immortal Hulk, and I become kind of obsessed by it. So, and I didn't get the early issues when they first came out. I read them digitally. So this seemed like a good opportunity to not only have a physical floppy version of the Immortal Hulk, their early issues, but also to just delve in deeper and savor it even more. Savoring comics, especially comics art, is a big part of my enjoyment of the hobby. So, and I think the whole idea of director's cuts comes from DVDs. And, back when DVDs first came out, it was so exciting. You could get the extended version of a movie, or you could get the commentary from the director and the actors and the writers and little special things. I guess in the days of streaming, you don't see that quite as much. I mean, those things are still out there, I think, but you're less likely to run across them. And eventually, I'm guessing that will fade away a bit. Or maybe you'll just, go to YouTube to get the extras. Whatever, total aside. So, what this gives us, and I guess the first issue of the Immortal Hulk was an oversized, 32-page story, as opposed to the normal 20-page story. What did this cost? It was expensive. I guess it probably only says on the back. It cost $6. But because this is how it works. I'm loving this comic so much that I was willing to do it. And every issue starts with a quote. The man is, on the whole, less good than he imagines himself or wants to be, which is kind of a theme of this story, that people do evil things perhaps because they actually want to do evil. Even though they then can't admit it to themselves, including in this case a character who kills 3 people. Now, other than this one ad, and given that this is this extra expensive comic, a special connoisseur's reprint, why have this ad? Of course, it's advertising the trade, but still, why have this ad in the middle of the story? Why not either put it here at the beginning or wait till after the story's done? And frankly, when you finish this first issue, this first story, would be the moment to remind you, you should go out and get these 2 trades. But anyway, that's my complaint. Other than that, I think there are no ads interrupting this story. And so here, there is no footnotes from the writer or anything like that. There's no extra pages of story that were cut out or anything along those lines. So in that sense, I totally had fun reading it again, and these giant, everything had a different impact on the page than it did when I read digitally, but particularly these giant, intense, full-page spreads, 2 in a row, which I thought was very radical, or slightly radical, to start with this big encounter, not an action scene, but an emotionally intense, psychologically intense encounter for the double page spread. And then zoom in on another double page spread to make it even more intense and kind of scary. It's a visual. The horror is in the writing and the psychology and in the visuals. And Joe Bennett, the artist, is kind of a master of that. I've become very fascinated by Joe Bennett's art. So yeah, I had a great time rereading this. I won't go over the story itself. I don't know if the digital version I read had this. Or you know what? I went back and looked at the digital version and it did, but I don't think I read it. But this gives us this little essay, again, not part of the director's cut because it would have been in the original comic, gives us a great sense of how this series is going to circle back to the original sort of nightmarish Hulk who comes out at night, and the horror that Dr. Bruce Banner feels in becoming this monster at night and doing terrible things. And if you remember that early Hulk, he was much more intelligent and he was kind of evil. He enjoyed being bad. It was very much a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story at the beginning, less of a Frankenstein monster story, or later the Hulk at some points. In fact, my favorite Hulk has often been the innocent, childlike Hulk. So, and it makes more sense how this story, or is he both, ties into, is he man or monster? Whoops, sorry, I'm holding it so you can't see it on the camera. On this cover of the original Hulk, is he man or monster, or is he both? And that idea, I think, that we all are both human and monster. So then the rest of this gives us the pencils, the raw pencils of Joe Bennett's art. I think what happens is, I have reason to believe this because I've purchased a piece of Joe Bennett art. Joe Bennett does his art very full, extremely full detailed pencils on paper, and then must send a scan to his inker, who is usually a fellow named Rui Jose. I don't know how to pronounce that. Rui Jose. I don't know. I don't know Spanish. Apologies to any Spanish speakers out there who know the proper pronunciation. Anyway, I find Joe Bennett's pencil work fascinating. And here is we also get Alex Ross's sketch a very detailed sketch before he painted the final cover. And then most of the design of this cover is directly from a famous Marie Severin cover. Alex Ross frequently does not come up with his own cover designs, his own poses, or anything like that. Comes straight homages or rip-offs or tracings, if you will, almost. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. So we really get to see the art in a new way. We get to a sense of all the hard work that's going into it, because we see all these lines that Joe Bennett had to draw just to make his perspective and other things work. We see how even in the pencils, he's thinking a lot about line weight. Let me see if I can flip back to the early pages here. So we get that. You can see the line weight is carried over. The inker probably makes other decisions about some of the textures of the lines, but a lot of it is in the pencils. And the intensity of the storytelling. We don't get a script here, so we don't know how much is, maybe in future director's cuts we'll get a script. We don't know how much is of all these choices comes from Joe Bennett and how much comes from Al Ewing. But we definitely get the sense. I don't know. For me, it's very exciting. It just gives me a whole extra sense of what went into the art and how the intensity of the art goes. And so I did maybe I should have brought out my iPad too, because I did go back to the digital version to look at it. And although I think the coloring is great on this comic, there are places where the color seemed like unnecessary amounts of shading. say, just looking at this steering wheel, because Joe Bennett already put in all the three-dimensionality, I think, into that steering wheel already in his pencils. You don't need to do any more than what he already put there. The colors just sort of re-emphasizes. But this steering wheel looked way better digitally than it does on the print. But I would say most of the color works very well on the printed page here. And but it looks even better in the digital version, for me. I like how now, just thinking about it as I look here, how the colorist chose to do red there on these panels. That might be kind of a very basic thing, but we go from the kind of reality shots to the more expressionistic shots. And what is he thinking when he shoots her? He's shocked, but maybe does he kind of like it? He has a choice whether to kill this fellow. He sort of, you could say he reacted too quickly when he shot the first woman, and then he made the choice to shoot the next guy who seemed threatening, and then chose to shoot the cashier who said, I haven't seen your face, I won't, please don't kill me, and he kills him anyway. Anyway, that's an interesting thing about this story and the moral choices. But then what is Bruce Banner's moral choices and the Hulk's moral choices also are up for question. So you can sort of tell, although I loved getting this and seeing all the pages in both forms, I kind of also am a little critical of it because it's called the director's cut, and I feel like given they're giving us, they're repurposing material that they've already made lots of money on, that they could have given us more. One way to go would have been a kind of running commentary from the writer on why he did this or that, or from the artist, actually. I would love that too. Maybe even more, love the artist, if the artist was making a lot of these choices, why he made these choices, get notes on it. But we don't get that. And I've added this to my pull list, so I'll get all 6 issues of this director's cut. I can't get enough of the Immortal Hulk. So the one other thing we get at the back, well, we get a few sketches, and these are supposedly alternate versions of that big double-page spread, but I couldn't see the difference in these alternate versions from the actual spread itself. If I don't see a difference between that and that. I don't see anything significant at all. So I'm not sure what they're showing us there. Or maybe they're just showing us, and this page also, I couldn't see the difference. It is interesting here, they show us these panels the artist created, which the inker, I guess digitally, will insert in a number of panels in that convenience store. You can see blank spaces, and that is meant to be inserted there, I guess, by the inker, this one. I'm not sure where this one goes, but similarly. And we get to see some variant covers, which is mildly interesting. My main note on the variant covers is none of them, with perhaps some exception of this one, none of them really are much of anything. They're just the artist, a different artist showing off his style on how he draws the Hulk, but not giving us much in terms of a composition or anything like that. So, and then we get the notes from the initial series editor, Tom Brevoort, compiled these thoughts about the Hulk when developing the series with writer Al Ewing. So I don't know if these are just Brevoort's notes to Ewing or notes he made after they brainstormed together. But I found all of this kind of interesting in this first section. Banner is spiritual, not materialistic. Can't be, can own nothing. But he's on a dark spiritual journey, I would say. And the Hulk's condition is like having diabetes. Banner is actively living with his condition. He's trying to do good with it. I don't know if it's clear if Banner's in control or Hulk is in control, I thought, in the series. So I think things changed a lot after these notes were written. But they specifically name check Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, We need a thought process analogous to Alan Moore on Swamp Thing. So they were very conscious of that, and it really does feel like the next best thing to Alan Moore's Swamp Things in terms of a re-envisioning of a character that is still true to its history and to the psychology of it and everything. So he says, we need a thought process analogous to Alan Moore on the Swamp Thing. Rather than doing the same stories again and again, how can we think about the skeleton of this series and build it up in a different way into something new? So that should be what every writer is thinking about when they're dealing with a old character who the same stories have been told about over and over again. I'd love to see more of that. I hope Al Ewing inspires other writers working on these commercial properties. The Hulk is as much a suspense horror comic as it is a superhero comic. Like in Swamp Thing, superheroes who come into the series should be presented through that particular lens of this worldview. And we, as the series continues, we really see that a lot with members of Alpha Flight and various other people showing up. They all are in the context of this suspense, mystery, horror story. So anyway, this only increases my feeling of how much I love and how brilliant I think the Immortal Hulk is. I do hope that future issues of the director's cut include more sort of inside information. So now this is a rich package compared to this package, the Savage Sword of Conan, the first volume in the, there it is listed as number 1, first volume in the new series started at Marvel. Instead of a black and white oversized magazine, Savage Sword of Conan is now a regular color comic with 20 pages of story and with rotating or ever-changing groups of creators working on it. Each group of creator does an arc or a story and then leaves. In fact, perhaps some of them just do one-shots. So this was the first 5 issues of Savage Sword of Conan. And it had a very solid Conan story and, to my mind, fantastic artwork. So I was delighted to see that they're releasing this black and white version where you can just look at Ron Garney's Conan artwork fully in black and white. So clearly this is devoted, well, either to people who just are obsessed with reading Conan in black and white, but probably devoted to people who, like me, were really impressed by the artwork and want to look at it in another way without the color. And the really notable thing about, there's lots of great stuff about the Ron Garney artwork. Here's a variant cover by Ron Garney. And a black and white, I don't know why there's a black and white version of the main cover, because that probably never existed in black and white originally. But one of the amazing things about Ron Garney's artwork is it has a certain impressionistic quality in terms of line superhero or American comic book art. It takes things to a greater degree of leaving out a lot, but you can still tell what's there. And here's a simple example. The line for this finger doesn't go all the way around. It goes part of the way, and you can just imagine what the rest is. And it works just as well in black and white as it did with color, despite the fact that not all the line is there. Or in this finger, much of the line is also just negative space. And that's all over here. So everything is all the information you need, and somehow it's just very artistically pleasing with that sense of space, and the use of the blacks and whites is so strong and dynamic. It really carries the day without any color. It looked great with color, actually. I can't remember who the colorist was at the moment. It might even say in the credits, even though, let's see, no, they don't mention the colorist in these credits. But anyway, it had great coloring. The colorist dealt with this kind of impressionistic line art in a great way. But Garney's his figures and his placement and layout and everything in the panels and all of that is dynamic and exciting, even in the smaller scenes. Like here, Conan's just throwing a plate. But it really moves. It has that feeling of life, of an artist who sat down and really quickly captured the moment, which is the kind of art that I love. And usually you don't see in comics, or you only see it when you see some preliminary sketches and stuff. So this captures that energy of sketches, but still is beautiful finished art. So I loved this. But I thought it was odd, given that this is so much about the artist, that there wasn't like anything about process or even an introduction from the artist or someone else talking about how the artist worked here. I really would have liked that at just a few extra pages. And since clearly that's what this is about, it's about the art. And also, I think part of why I love this is, I grew up in the era of the best inkers would often use a lot of ink on the page because they didn't know what the colors would turn out like. And the colors were very basic in the old days when I grew up with comics. And so I became very fascinated by the inkiness of the page, by the blacks. And there was a whole art of placement of blacks and use of blacks in both for light and shadow, which is a lot of what's going on here, and in composition and guiding the eye and all of that. And so this is kind of a return in spades to the mastery of that use of blacks. Now, maybe some really experienced artists will notice flaws or ways that Garney didn't do this right. But for me, as a comic book reader, an aficionado of the art, but not an expert on the art, this is felt like a tour de force of a very specific kind of art. So anyway, I'm very happy to own it. There's only thing back here is a few little variant covers. I would have loved to have seen some of his thumbnails or heard him talk about his process. Anyhow, it's still worth getting for me. But again, Marvel could give us more than they do. And finally, again, all of these are Marvel. I didn't realize that when I picked them out. As you can see there already, I love Conan, particularly from the point of view of the art. So when I saw on In Stock Trades that there was this Marvel art of Conan the Barbarian, I instantly added it to my cart. And I knew before it arrived that it would be a bit disappointing because I saw on someone else's video that they talked about how it was just okay. So it seems to just cover the Marvel art of the color Conan comics. Although it's the Marvel art of Conan the Barbarian, it includes King Conan and Conan the Adventurer and things like that, but not Savage Tales and Savage Sword. Which is too bad because some of the greatest Marvel Conan art was in those books. I suppose this is the colorized version of something that first appeared in there. I wish there was a lot more like this opening spread here. The something about the way the book's put together is not the best way, like this is also great, not the best way to focus on art. We get a lot of splash pages and single panels, and that's pretty good. But somehow it's not very creative in its display of the art. And frankly, it's a $50 book. And there's a lot of $50 books I've gotten from Marvel that are much better in terms of the quality of the book. I love this. I want a lot more of these close-up double-page spreads. That's wonderful. But for the most part, we get more stuff like this. And it goes chronologically through basically the history, gives you through the captions kind of a history of the different artists that passed through Conan, and some stuff about the inkers, showing pages that John Buscema inked himself, and Gil Kane inked by different people. And so by reading these captions, you get a nice little history of the art of Conan, and that part I liked. I just somehow, especially for the $50, now I paid half because of in-stock trades and the way I try to order things on in-stock trades the week they come out. But still, it seems like for seeing that it was a $50 book, I expected a little something more. But I got to say, the day I got it, I just stayed up late at night reading all the captions and looking over the artwork. So I'm still really glad I have it. But I thought I'm mostly mentioning this for other Conan fans in case they decide, if they're ordering it like I did online without seeing it, to give them a sense of what it's like and what they'll be getting for their $50. Here's the size difference between that and a normal comic book size thingamabob. So it's a little bit larger than a comic book. It's just barely large enough to count as a coffee table art book. You think of all the other stuff they could have put in here, maybe little interviews with artists or commentary from artists, or maybe some of the artists' preliminary sketches. Who knows what? Anyway, it still gives you a great sense of the evolution of the first 15 or 20 years that Conan was at Marvel before it left Marvel. I miss some of these later artists. It's kind of inspired me, especially since a lot of this is probably in dollar bins, to go find that sort of end game of Conan when it was Conan the Adventurer, and then a few miniseries that I didn't know about either, because I guess I wasn't buying Marvel Comics at the time. Anyway, so there you have it. 3 different books for looking at artwork of Marvel Comics. I'm glad I got all of them, actually. But I guess with each one, I had some, fantasies that it could have given you even more. I do like this afterword by Michael Allred. It might have been fun to have a bunch of different artists talk about their influences from this period of Conan the Barbarian, which I think, especially Barry Smith, but other artists too, was a big deal for a lot of people reading comics in the 70s, growing up in the 70s and early 80s, that may have influenced a lot of artists and excited a lot of people about comics. A lot of, at least mostly male people, I suppose. Anyway, that's it for now. I will probably have another video coming up pretty soon. I seem to be on a roll. Talk to y'all later.